Welcome to Module 1, Infrastructure and Services. So, what do we need to consider in terms of enabling mobility and meeting people's basic needs through infrastructure and services in cities? Well, firstly we need to think about physical access to transport and buildings. That is usually created with able-bodied people in mind. But what about people with physical, sight, or hearing impairments? What about parents trying to get around with several young children? We need to think about economic access. For many, the cost of public transport, for those who are poor and who need to travel through the city frequently, can be a large burden, or actually prohibitive. And what about the cost of basic services? Are people able to meet their basic health and nutrition needs? Meet the costs of decent education for their children? Then there is geographic availability. What are the locations and distribution of education, health and employment services? Is transportation, street lighting, sewage, electricity and clean water equally available to all? And we should think about social factors which exclude certain groups from services and opportunities. There are many deeply rooted discriminatory attitudes, behaviors and norms that affect the ability of marginalized groups to fully participate in and benefit from life in the city. These norms make some groups largely invisible to most city dwellers and to policymakers. And, when they are visible, they are often deprioritized or ignored. Lastly, we need to think about political participation. Do all city residents have equal opportunities for voice and influence in the planning of infrastructure and services? Are government policies promoting equitable access and outcomes in cities? These different dimensions can help us understand why improving inclusion in cities is complex and marginalization persists.
From a governance perspective, addressing these can be challenging. Infrastructure and service plans need to be based on evidence. Yet often governments lack data on marginalized groups, on their needs and concerns as well as where they live, where they travel, and how they access infrastructure and services. Insufficient revenue or funds to invest in improved infrastructure and services is an ongoing challenge for local governments. Given their complexity, sometimes it is also unclear which government department or level is responsible to ensure changes are made and with whom they should coordinate. These weaknesses contribute to the rights of marginalized groups not being prioritized even if there is support within government to make such improvements.
Let's look at a few examples. If we start from the ground up, then we can look at the challenges faced by persons with disabilities or other mobility challenges. Across all 14 cities, we heard that persons with disabilities face enormous challenges in navigating cities. Sometimes there are no public transport options at all, and in many cities footpaths are in terrible disarray. There are rarely ramps to enter buildings for those in wheelchairs, and there are few supports in public places or street crossings for the sight or hearing impaired.
Or consider the perspectives of women. Women often face a whole raft of challenges in navigating cities due to gender unequal urban planning. Examples of urban infrastructure issues that disproportionately affect women include a lack of pedestrian pavements, inadequate lighting in streets, insufficient bus stops with long walking distances from people's homes or to and from schools, supermarkets, and health centers. In recent years, the issue of sexual harassment on public transport in cities throughout Asia has received a lot of attention, but little change has happened to prevent it.
And lastly, the experiences of those who live in poor quality housing, particularly informal settlements, face multiple disadvantages. Prominent among these is access to clean water and sanitation.
The drivers of these problems are highly contextual. We'd like to start today's session, therefore, by unpacking some of the inclusion problems in specific places. We'd like to ask you to tell us, what are the main reasons for these exclusion issues in your cities? Why do these problems persist?